possible. Let's take a look at this tiger and see how this fares on very, very quickly front. So I'm going to go into outline mode. Just go ahead and select that. Again, you can see because some of them are so small, but even here, these things could be cleaned up. So Illustrator's own tools to do that don't do too bad a job. You just have to keep a close eye on detailed parts of your image. To access them, simply right-click and choose Sync, and you come away from it, and that's it. Now, this is its automatic mode at the moment, and this is more points on the right. Good. Put in artificial intelligence to have a crack at it with this point control freak, and there's options from that small bar. Okay, you can click on these pretty good as they are. Let's just go, and maybe a second pass might not be a bad idea, and even here, that's a lot better, nowhere near as dense as it was. So if you need to simplify or clean up your path, grids can be a useful tool when you're drawing content and also when you're positioning content onto an artboard. They are easy to access in the Properties Inspector. When you have nothing selected, you'll see that there is a small icon just here to turn on a grid and to turn it off again. You can also use the shortcut Command apostrophe, Control apostrophe on Windows to toggle that as well. When you have got a grid, if it doesn't meet your immediate requirements, you can always edit it. And to do that, you go to the Preferences, which is under the Illustrator menu on the Mac and the Edit menu on Windows. You'll see here there is a section for guides and grid. You prefer a dotted grid. And then you can set as I want. Now I can also add guides to the document as well, which can be very, very useful. And to do that you want them to be, you can use them in conjunction with grids or use them on the rulers, and which can be very, very useful. And to do that, you can use the rulers. So Command R or Control R to show the rulers, and you drag guides out to the location that you want them to be. You can use them in conjunction with grids or use them on their own. Now, whether your guides are locked or not, which you can determine in 3 different places, go to the View menu, down to Guides, and as you can see here, Lock Guides is still available, which means these guides are unlocked, but also with nothing selected, you have that option here in the Guides section. If guides are unlocked, you can always select them with the selection tool and actually change their location if you want to numerically. So if, for example, I wanted this to be, here's a quick tip for you, if you're dragging in guides from the rulers and you want rulers from the top and also from the side, you can actually get around having to go to each ruler, because all you need to do is hold down the Option key or Alt key when you drag it. Straight line. Guides that you drag from the rulers in Illustrator will only get you so far, and of course they won't meet all of your requirements. The good news is you can turn any of this example. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the rectangular grid tool here, and I'm going to drag out a rectangle to add some more intersections, like my rectangular shape here. If I just tap D to give that the default, which inside this particular document doesn't have a fill, okay, you can see them. But if I want them to actually be guides, I can use the shortcut Command 5 or Control 5 on Windows, or if you prefer to use the menus, go to the View menu, down to Guides, and choose Make Guides. And there you are, you now have some guides of your own design. Now again, these probably wouldn't have been great for the sort of whole rectilinear thing, but they are very, very useful when you're doing things, for example, maybe working with concentric circles. So if I just go ahead and drag, it's more useful for some other application, and select the guides, and delete them like so. All we need to do is convert it, and when you want to get rid of your guides, you can either make sure that guides are unlocked and select This chapter is all about gradients, and we're going to begin by taking a look at handle on I'm going to see the Shift and tap X key on my keyboard because I noticed that the fill is in front here in the toolbox, and you can see that in a few places, okay, that the fill bit like so. Okay, so here's our gradient panel. Now we've got some presets here. We can add to these as we need to. We can see the fill and stroke swatches here. We've also got a little button to reverse the gradient if necessary. And we'll go ahead and we'll bypass these dialogues here, white to black. So what I have this color. You can also eyedropper a double click and on the artwork if you want to as well. Just I think goes really well at the top, and you'll see to add new colors, you simply click underneath and a color. Now you may have noticed there's this bar hovering around down here. There we go. Gradient, and this is called the gradient annotator. If you're not seeing it, it's in the view menu and you can check it just down here. There we go. Okay, it's important enough to get its own shortcut, so there you go, it must be pretty good. And it's in the view menu and you can check it just down here. There we go, slider. We can double click here in place, okay, and change our colors if we want to, there like so. You can there is a tool to help you with gradients. It's called the gradient tool. It's actually active at the moment, and that's what's providing this. Unlike Photoshop, you have to have a gradient there in order to use it in the first place. So I can drag across here like so to apply my gradient. I'm then going to go ahead and save one, and that's it. I'll just hold down the command key here, okay, and I'll tap the period key to apply a gradient. It will use the most recently saved one, and I can work my way around doing that. Now, if this is a gradient I'm likely to want to keep, what I can do is go to this menu, just continuing on. On here from the previous movie where we were looking at linear gradients. We're now going to take a look at radial gradients. So I'm going to hold down my command key, that would be Control on Windows, and click on another area that I have not yet applied a gradient to. Hit the period key to apply a gradient to it, and then, with that still selected, I'm going to go over to the gradient panel to the colours towards the right. Of course, you can have more than two. Now, essentially, everything you've seen inside of the movie around linear gradients, so basically mixing colours here, that stays true, almost like someone shining a torch around here, but they're standing there doing it. There you are. So with this particular annotator, you've got a few different things. On the left-hand side here, this allows me to change the size. So got this widget on the top. It's just about here. And you can click and drag to make your gradient. And you can spin the gradient around by hovering over the dotted line. One extra and much overlooked control, and it's this little thing just here. This is the gradient offset, and you pull this to offset the center of the gradient, and that will change the way that it blends. So here I go, I'm going to pull that just a bit further, and you can see it's almost like an elliptical torch beam there. Okay, so that's something that a lot of people overlook. They really do miss that particular thing, and it's very useful and gives you a ton of creative possibilities. And here, this light blue stop, this is in place. You can see I can actually change the opacity there down to 0% if I want to. I'll take it back up to 100% here. Colours are the same on either end. To get a successful blend for a shading gradient or a tinting gradient, then make sure that the colours are the same on either end and change the opacity of one. You'll end up with a much better result if you do. Only fairly recently released free ways that would be nearly impossible, or at the very least incredibly time consuming if you did them with linear and radial gradients. What I'm going to do is to tap the period key on my keyboard, a free form gradient in points mode. Now we're going to move, I'm going to put these colours in. That's how it works. Pretty good, I think. What's the corners? That is by default where it drops them, and it looks at the file and says, all right, these colours are in there, so I'm going to put these colours in. That's how it works. Pretty good, I think. Not what we want, but it is pretty good. I'm going to change this to lines mode just for a moment, and then I'm going to come up to this top left-hand corner, okay, just in a bit from there, and click. And I'm going to change that color, so I'll double click on that, and then I'm going to make my way around here and click. I can just choose this. Actually, I'll stick with the same one all the way around the edges. So I'm just going to make my way around like so and go back to the beginning here. Similar to the curvature pen tool, I can actually add points at different places, and I can do many things, and it's getting very, very, very confused. Okay, I'll switch back to points mode. Now I can work with my points here. So I'll delete. Okay, you just click on it and delete it. Okay, and just carries the same color. So here we are. If I wanted to actually make it look like there was shallower water, because when you do that, the next point you play, and just go over to this one in the corner just here. So delete that. Now I'm going to go back and click on this one, because when you do that, the next point you lighter colors, I've now got a way to do it. You can also change how much it blends by going to this outer dotted line here and pulling outwards. There's a maximum you can reach, but you can see how that's blending very, very differently just there. They're a great thing to have. They take a little bit of getting used to, and also be very difficult to do which mode you're going to go round in. Try not to get them too close. They really don't like it, as you saw here, but there you are. They are something that would be... Here we are in a file with a super introduced in 200 in 2012, and the reason I remember that, do some gradients on a stroke, looking out at tower. So let's get on to switch those over, and then you can hit the period key on your keyboard to create a stroke. You choose a red color like so, go to the other end and double click. Is good. Okay, now we can go toward and change that to yellow. A numeric between, you can move and choose. So we've got inside stroke. So now it starts on this edge, last one, and have the it goes around. To these three icons, we can also apply the gradient along the stroke. So now it starts on this edge, last one, and have the gradient apply across the stroke. Everybody can say, oh, we made a rainbow. We did, we made one together. So we can go that way. Now, I could leave it at that, but that wouldn't be very fair, because when you're doing gradients across a stroke and you change the gradient to radial, mad stuff happens because it reflects the gradient. You're doing gradients across a stroke and you change the gradient to radial, mad stuff happens because it reflects the gradient across. Interesting, and I'm sure you would find a use for that. I'm just going to set this back to linear. Now, if you wanted to keep your particular gradient, don't forget you can always go It is pretty easy to turn your Illustrator artwork into a pattern. So let's have a look at how we do that. I've got a small piece of artwork up here in the top left, and I'm going to go up to the Objects menu, come down to Pattern and choose Make. Taken. I then get a small informational telling me that it's been added to the swatches panel, and I can see it over there in the panel. I'll hit OK, and I'm taken into the Pattern Maker workspace. It's kind of like a special isolation mode with just a couple of extra things along the top here in the grey bar. Then we have the Brilliant Maze, that's what I'm going to call it. And then I can tune in rows, and you've it's working. Used to doing third, I don't think particularly. So let's the quarter, draw that yourself. And that's exactly what this small tool at the top of the pattern options dialog is designed for. With this, you can actually change the tile width to where I was, because as apps, so whether they overlap in rows or columns. This generally gives you the how the overlaps work if your pattern where I was, because as I said, I did design this with a tile in mind. You can also choose how the overlaps work if your pattern has overlaps. so whether they overlap in rows or columns. This generally gives you the preview here, 5x5, and dim copies too, so on. So you can see all of that for artwork. Now, if you need to make any changes, all you need to do is double click on the so I've got a rectangle just here, which to that, I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to hold down in the course, you'll be finding out how you could actually original rectangle, and then without holding any keys, the artwork with my pattern inside of it. And there is a another kind of pattern we can make in Illustrator, and that is a pattern brush. Now in the course, brushes are later on in the chapter with appearances, but this one is worth mentioning at this particular point because it's so very useful and it relates to patterns. I'm going to open my brushes panel just here and make that slightly larger. So I have simple lines. I'm going to drag that into the brushes panel like so, and then when this dialog appears, I'm of course choose pattern for these things is give it a name. So I'm going to call this until a little bit later different parts where the stroke may just here. The one on the left is the corner tile. Now there are some automatic options here that I can choose. So if I haven't drawn any artwork for that, then I can go ahead and use one of these options. The others are inner corners, so that's one just here. You can see there's no tile specified for that. And also, again, there you could choose from some auto options if you want to add. The other thing you might want to do is apply different colors to your stroke, and that's where you need to come down to the bottom here to the colorization method. Now, I'm going to choose Hue Shift for mine, and the key color is the only color that's here at the moment, but otherwise I could click on this eyedropper and sample a color that became the key for the art. Color is need to come down to the bottom here, see to be had method, eyedropper, and sample a color that became the key for the art. I'll hit OK, but just first I want to remind you that the first of these tiles is the one for the corner. So I'll hit OK, and then I'm going to zoom out here, move across a little bit, and select this blue line that I have on the art, and now apply. So I don't like the corners. Well, that's where this small compound, pull down Alt or Option into the dialog here. I'm going directly to my own corner in these places. I also now have the opportunity to fix that spacing. So I'm going to click in the spacing field here, and then using my up arrow key, increment that until it starts to look okay. Now, if I turn on preview, so much better already. And I think possibly, for me, I think that's working around just there from that dialog. And there you are, a pattern brush allowing you to create your own patterns to apply to strokes. What I'm going to do here is just select the rectify nudge it to do with it value to a particular include particularly to get to the pattern scale the bar. That for if I'm holding down shift to keep it proportional, I could also then hold down the tilde key, okay, and I could scale the pattern at the same time. However, you do have to scale and rotate. And so, for example, if I wanted to move it, choose to click so you can turn it off to make it then. Of course, includes patterns here, which automatically transform objects back on and cancel out of that dialog. I'll tap S on my keyboard to I can get to the dialog. Okay, and again here you can see transform objects and transform patterns. If I turn off objects and now go for my scaling, then I can go ahead and scale the pattern down to however I want it to be. Okay, so there you are. That's how you can do it. There is one other sneaky way, but it's a little bit of a handful involving the tilde key. So if while I had the scale tool active and I started dragging holding down shift to keep it proportional, I could also then hold down the tilde key, okay, and I could scale the pattern at the same time. However, you do have to be really careful with that shortcut because shift tilde is also the way to select the curvature pen tool. If I were you, I'd